All right, today on the show, we have Hans Struzyna from the Gunderman Group with Keller Williams Luxury International in the San Francisco Bay Area. Let me tell you a little bit about Hans. Hans is a U.S. Olympian turned top producing Bay Area realtor and is a realtor partner with the Gunderman Group, the top team in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, having done, and this is absolutely incredible, over 50 million in just under 4 years, Hans believes in being coachable, applying what he learns to the benefit of his clients, and ultimately providing as much value as possible to his clients. And at the end of the day, he always says he is an advisor and not a decider, and works to improve his skills and knowledge so he can live that out at a high level. Hans is also the host of an interview-based podcast called Another Way to Play. We encourage everyone right now, grab your phone if you're not listening, well, even if you are listening to this on a phone, or if you're watching us live, grab your phone, pull up a podcast app, and look up Another Way to Play and subscribe. This is where Hans and his guests talk about mindset, probably the most important part of running a real estate practice, and how it helps you blow the roof off your success. So Hans is a triple threat. He's a top producing realtor, a podcaster, and of course, a U.S. Olympian. We are so excited to have him on the show. Please visit him at his website, which is hansstruzyna.com. I'm going to spell that for you. It's HANSSTRUZYNA.com. It'll also be in the show notes. Please visit him there and subscribe to his podcast. Hans, welcome to the show.
Man, I appreciate you having me on. This is awesome.
Yeah, really excited. I never get to talk to other podcasters unless I get invited on a show, and I never get invited on shows, but I never get to talk to another podcaster, also top realtor and a U.S. Olympian. You're the first Olympian we've had on the show. So we're really excited to have you. And I know you're relatively, I don't want to say new to real estate. You've done 50 million in production, but still in 4 years, that is beyond incredible. Do you mind sharing with our audience? Well, let's first start with the Olympics. How did you become an Olympic athlete?
Gosh, that's a long story for sure, but the short version is essentially one day at a time. And I was in the sport for just over 12 years, and it started in the Seattle, Washington area on Lake Sammamish. And we, as a family, got word that we could take family lessons, like a group little private thing during the summer. And then my parents knew about rowing. They were not into rowing, but it was visible in the Pacific Northwest because there's water all over the place. And we just thought that would be a cool thing. So we went down and tried it out. And basically it was kind of fun. I wasn't really doing another sport at the time because a big part of my story is I grew late. So athletically, I was behind the curve for football and basketball and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And basically, I wasn't doing a sport that fall because when I was playing football, I was the smallest guy, but one of the oldest, And sure. So I basically got convinced to join the team. And then I joined the fall team, and then kept going into the spring. And then once we hit the spring, that's what everyone says, you kind of get hit with this bug of rowing. And it's this weird thing that you kind of love it and you hate it at the same time. And it's hard to explain for those who haven't done it, but I definitely loved it a little more than I hated it. Sure. And I just kept going from there.
Wow. So you've been rowing for 12 years.
Yeah. Well, I guess I officially really retired in 2016 after the Olympics, but it wasn't, well, I officially really retired in 2018 because I was kind of half in, half out for a couple of years, just deciding if I wanted to go back for another cycle or not. But I did take that whole year off. That was a plan. And I was thinking maybe I'll come back, maybe not. We'll see.
Well, I can't, how when you were actively practicing for the Olympic team, how many hours a day were you putting in? And was it basically every, 5 or 6 days a week? Was it 7 days a week? How does that work?
It was interesting. I was actually trying to remember that today. I was listening to another podcast and someone was just talking about how she was working 6 days a week on average through her 20s and 30s. And that's kind of one big thing of how she propelled to where she's at. I was, during high school, it was only 5 days a week. During college, it was about 20. The NCAA tops you out at 20 hours a week.
Oh, wow.
and that's just for sports in general, because
Sure.
you're student athlete and all that
Right.
stuff. But then after college, it's like, that's your job, man. Like you are in it. So we were training, I think, depends on the week and the month, but 11 to 14 times a week. And
Wow.
so it was, in many cases, it was literally twice a day for a couple of hours each session. And, your heart rate training, your cardiovascular is a big part of the sport, as well as obviously lifting weights and then practicing the skill of actually rowing the boat. So all of that combined is, it was probably 30, 40 hours when you count sort of the warm-ups and cool downs and all that other stuff a week for 3 or 4 years after college.
That's incredible. Wow. And I can't imagine just the sheer amount of discipline that's required to compete at that level has to have served you in really a lot of other areas of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've talked about this on other shows and I'll talk about it on this one, which is, I definitely have built up this discipline, hard work and stuff. It came to me sort of from a young age because I had trouble in school. Actually, I was diagnosed in 4th grade with like a learning disability.
Mm-hmm.
I saw, it wasn't like the typical thing of dyslexia that most people think, where you like see things backwards, but that's like the easiest way to describe it. And, I struggled in math and spelling and all that sort of stuff. So I ended up having to go into basically special classes before school and do extra homework after school. And so I was really upset about it at 4th grade. And then something eventually clicked for me, which is like, this is what it is. And if I just power through this, I'm going to probably get through it. And I ended up graduating this program, I think in less than 4 years, which at the time was probably the fastest anyone had gone through that program and graduated.
Wow.
And so that really stuck with me of like, okay, you can't always control, what you're born with or what you have coming in, but you can definitely control the effort and the attitude that you bring to it. And then, forward that to sports and business and life and relationships and all the other stuff that we could talk about. I've just had a lot of reps at it, frankly.
Well, and it sounds like, even overcoming the learning disability was really a discipline in and of itself. You were already going to school. Now you're going before school and after school. You're putting in additional reps, even to just overcome it. And you did it quicker than anyone previously had. That's the almost, an incredible feat. Well, it is not almost, it is an incredible feat, and really probably set the stage for you to be able to conquer anything else. I was
definitely blessed with great parents, by the way, who like signed me up for that, who could afford it, who could, push me to actually do the work, all that good stuff. So I always talk about, for the Olympics, at least, it takes a tribe to send someone to the Olympics, from donations to meal prep to all that stuff, all the not little things. Anyways, so it wasn't necessarily all me, and I can't take 100% credit, but I ended up doing the work, but I had a lot of good influences helping.
Was there ever times where you wanted to quit and just say, this is too much, at any point during your career, and maybe this would still been when you were younger, and your parents said, stick it out, you can do this. What was the push there, or was it all just something you wanted, or you said it takes a village? So I'm curious on because I think parents struggle with this a lot. Like, my child is into this particular sport or extracurricular activity, but they're frustrated and they want to quit. And like, what do you do? Like, do you let them quit or do you not let them quit? Right.
Well, I haven't, let's see, I think it was my 5th grade football team, and it was through the Boys and Girls Club. So it was like a rec thing. And, I was telling my parents, as I'm sure many parents who are listening have heard, the coach is a jerk. And it was not until later in the season that they actually realized that the coach was the problem. But through that, it was like, no, like, he's just being tough on you guys because it's a tough sport and blah, blah, blah. And you don't quit. You see this through, like, you committed to the season. You can't let your teammates down. Like, I got a lot of those good lessons. But then I also realized, like, no, the coach is actually just a bad person and shouldn't be in charge of a 5th grade football team.
I have to pause here a second. I had the exact same experience. I only did Pop Warner football or whatever we called it in fifth grade one year. The coach, and I was, in fifth grade, I didn't know the coach was a disaster. But looking back, I was like, oh man, that coach was brutal and not in a good way. Just a maybe not even a great guy kind of thing. So I understand that. I ended up pivoting. I was a tennis player, so I stayed with tennis. But yeah, it drove me away, and it wasn't because I wimped out. It was just like, no, this is not. There's no fun in this, and maybe there shouldn't be a lot of fun, but there should be a little tiny bit. And this coach just sucked all of it out.
100%. Yeah, it's so to answer your question, it's like there's a line between push through and do what's hard and do the thing that makes you uncomfortable, and then do are you in a healthy environment? Is this really a productive thing for you?
And how important has coaching been? I imagine as an Olympic athlete, you coach, every Olympic athlete has a coach, I'm sure. About pretty much every type of athlete has a coach. So how important has coaching been in order to, sort of just being able to sit down and do the work, say, okay, the coach says, do this, I'm going to do that because the coach knows the program and the path. Being coachable, I imagine, is just a critical aspect of life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said it, like every athlete has a coach along the way somewhere, if not multiple coaches at multiple different times.
Yeah.
And there's definitely an element of like picking a coach and trying to find someone who aligns with you. But there's also an element of like going with someone who just has succeeded in their own path and then now can teach it to you, and then trying to like learn it a new way. And I had, as I said, I had really great coaches, some really bad coaches, all of whom certainly had more experience than me and knew a little bit of something. And I frankly learned something from all of them. And I really seriously think one of my best traits as a real estate agent, as a business person, and as just a human being and a friend and whatever, is that coachability aspect, is like being able to take someone's opinion or their thought or their feedback and then apply, think about it critically, of course, but then actually try it, apply it, and see how it works in my situation. And if you can apply that when your coach is a jerk or a bad coach, and you can say, what's the one thing that I can learn from this person?
Right.
All you're doing is improving your ability to be coachable and to really take advantage when you get a good one.
Well, that's true, because coaches can be jerks and still be right. You're right. And so a lot of times I know I've had, whether any sort of teacher or coach in my life, they're not always nice and friendly, but they could also be accurate in what they're wanting me to do. And I've sort of learned, and I don't know, I'm curious what your thoughts are, as, we have so much independence and individuality in the United States here, and we're taught every child is unique and special. And I think kids are probably becoming harder to coach, because I don't know how much they're being taught to listen to someone else who might know a bit better or a bit more. And I wonder if that's as strong as it was when you and I were younger.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yes, every kid is special and unique and all of that, like everyone is.
Sure.
But there's things like the Myers-Briggs or, disc profiles that all real estate agents know about. And like, we all also fit into patterns, and not that we're all predictable per se, but just because you think you're, a perfect special snowflake, doesn't mean you can't also learn something from a very like broad stroking piece of advice.
Yeah. So how did you make the switch from Olympic athlete to real estate?
So I would go down to San Diego with my team or various teams, because there's an Olympic training center down there. And as you can imagine, the weather's great all year round.
Sure.
So we'd go down there for various lengths of stay for training camps. And with one of the teams, we couldn't stay on campus because it was all full. So we had to get a Airbnb, and we stayed with a couple different people, one of whom we only needed half of their large house. And they said, okay, that's cool. You can have the half. We'll be living in the other half. And it was kind of weird, but for us, we were like, cool, we'll just stay there. It's 5 minutes away from the training center. We don't care. We're just trying to crash on a couch basically. And they're real estate agents and they were flipping houses also.
Oh,
And so basically I just sort of trying to be friendly and make it not awkward that we were kind of crashing in their couch and like eating all this food in their kitchen. Would just talk to them about what I did, the Ford model, like family, recreation, occupation, dreams, basically like, what do you guys do? And what's your life like? And I learned pretty quickly that they were real estate agents, they were investors, and they were living a lifestyle that I thought was pretty cool. He was training for an Ironman at the time. They had 3 kids. They had all things looked pretty good, frankly, from a lifestyle perspective. And so I just kept in touch with them, and we stayed with them a handful of times after that. And after the Olympics, they invited me down back to San Diego to talk to me about their business and what they actually did. And the end of that 2-day little kind of recruitment, I guess, I don't really know what to better call it. They offered me this opportunity to effectively open up a satellite office of their operation in my area, which is in the Bay Area. And they would support me with all their VAs and all of their systems from San Diego. And the licenses, it was one broker license because it's one state. So It worked out pretty well. So that is... I said, that sounds pretty good. It sounds really flexible. I can get my real estate license, and if I don't like it, I'll go into commercial or I'll do something else. And maybe I'll go back to training, who knows? But that is how I started.
And so when opening the office or when starting your own practice, how did you go about finding clients? I'm always fascinated. I don't produce myself. I have a license. I bought things myself, but I've never worked with the public. That's not really what I do. But I'm always fascinated with agents and how they get started. So, how was it that you started finding people to work with?
Well, these guys, being that they had sort of that investment flair, were focused on foreclosures and that sort of thing. The broker, I believe, still holds the record for the most REOs sold in Southern California. I think it was in 2009 or 2010. He did like 750 or something ridiculous, back in the 09, 2010, something like that. And so he was like, that just is a model. It's transactional, but it's a model that works because people in foreclosure don't care if you're brand new. They care, like, I need to get out of foreclosure. They just want the deal. Basically. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I basically started cold calling lists of pre-foreclosures and, just anything that looked like it had some hair on it, frankly. And I got the Mojo dialer. I would do triple line dialer, a couple hours a day, set appointments, the model, like that's what I was doing. And then in the first couple of deals, I would get an appointment and he would get on a Southwest flight, fly up, do the appointment with me because I wasn't licensed at the time. He was. And so he would be the agent. I would be just his assistant, basically. And then I got to learn firsthand what he was doing and all of that. And then once I got licensed, I was just going on those appointments myself. And I did 9 deals my first year, and I almost did 11, but 2 of them, crazy stories, but they were foreclosures, and they got foreclosed on because the sellers were just so deep in denial. I saw hundreds of thousands, in one case, like a couple $100,000 of net equity evaporate for somebody. And it was like, it like kind of crushed me, frankly, because I put in all this work. I worked so hard to get them to understand where they were at, and it just disappeared. I'm like, I don't know if I can keep doing this forever. Yeah. But that's how I started is in the foreclosure, short sale, notice of default world.
Are you still working mostly with investors, or is that, or are you working more with the public, buyers, sellers, that kind of thing as well?
I am working exclusively with the public. Except for my own personal investing. No, sure. I do. Well, that's not entirely true. I have a couple of buddies and a couple of acquaintances who do want to flip and who do want to do some investing. So I keep my eyes out, but the market here is just so hard for, rentals and flips and stuff because there's such a demand for housing right now in the Bay Area that even if something's a total dog, it sells for a premium and there's no margin in it to flip it.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's the Bay Area. Boy, it's just its own animal. It's
Oh my
absolutely
gosh, yeah.
incredible. That in New York, I think they like trade off back and forth with
Hmm.
what's more exclusive and expensive. We're here in Chicago. Things are a little bit more reasonable here, but we're seeing activity slow down. We have about 700 realtors at our company here, and it's amazing because I would think like I'm buying right now because rates are, where they're at, of course.
Yeah.
And I just assumed everybody would be, not everyone, but a lot of people would be coming out of the stay-at-home order earlier this year, like I did, saying, I want a bigger place.
Yep.
And some brokers are experiencing that, and a lot are saying, oh, it's pretty quiet right now. So it's really
Interesting.
unusual time.
Well, our geography, I don't know Chicago that well. And I hope to go there. We were actually going to go there this summer. My wife went to UW-Madison, and we were going to
Sure.
do, some time in there and then go up to Madison and whatever, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't been. So I don't know the geography, but here there's been a real trend of eastward movement, meaning everyone in Silicon Valley through the peninsula up to San Francisco has gone to the East Bay.
Yeah.
Because the density is a little bit less, your money goes a lot farther on a dollar per square foot basis. And then all of our people, like our current residents, are moving to like Sacramento, Tahoe, Idaho, Oregon, it's,
Wow.
Texas, you name it. It's east. It's everyone's moving east for whatever reason.
Yeah, yeah. I have a friend who has a rent control in the city, and
Mhm.
he's been there for like 20 years, and he makes incredible money. He probably makes, well, anyway, I won't get into it, but he makes a good living, and he lives in this little tiny apartment. He's like, I can never give this up because
Yeah.
it's really pretty crazy. He's like, one day I'll be able to afford a $3 million place, but he lives in this little tiny, basically studio with his wife because he gets the greatest deal ever. So I know, rentals are just, so unusual in New York
For
and San
sure.
Francisco. We don't have rent control here, so everything's a bit different. But let's talk about marketing, because you
Mhm.
are obviously a marketing guy like me. Talk a little bit about sort of how you market your business, and even any suggestions for our audience who might be thinking of, right now as things kind of slow down towards the end of the year, what could I be doing to gear up my marketing for either early next year or even right now?
Yeah, I've got two different thoughts on this. One is probably the answer you're expecting to some degree, and the other one may not be. So I'll start with that one,
Sure.
which is my personal opinion is that the best marketing you do is to kill it for your client. Because if you do that,
Yeah.
you will have a walking billboard for eternity with
Yeah.
that person. For example, just got literally on Monday, it's Friday today, house closed. I worked with that buyer for maybe 2 weeks, showed them a couple of off markets, negotiated, we went into it, but it was a short engagement and they've already sent me 2 referrals. And,
Wow.
and so that to me, like a couple of the things that I really did when I joined the Gunderman Groups, I told you I was doing foreclosures for about 2 years. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. So fast forward, I pitched myself to the top team in the East Bay who I knew socially through mutual contacts. And they agreed to ultimately bring me on. And all I did was learn their flavor of real estate. And that flavor included just leaning so hard into the fiduciary duty of our license and representing people's interest, understanding the contract backwards, forwards, left, right, center, and knowing how to open and close loopholes, knowing how to exploit a solar lease or what a test hole is, and really understanding this as not just like I'm trying to lead generate and be transactional, but like I am genuinely looking out for this person's best interest, especially when you've got $1 million price point.
Right.
Um, it goes so far. So I would say if people are listening to this, their business is starting to slow down for the year, which all of ours is for the moment. Start reading the contract that you write, really seriously go through that thing line by line, start taking notes, read it 3 times before the end of the year and know it like any other document that you've ever spent time with. Like if you can then tell your client, like they call you with a question and you're in your car and you say, yeah, line 8, section B needs to be blah, blah, and blah.
Oh,
And
you're a
here's why I wrote it
superstar.
that way.
Yeah.
They're like, wait a second, are you look? And I was like, no, I just know it,
Yeah.
And and so that to me is absolutely paramount if you want to really knock it out for people. And then beyond that, it's then, definitely asking for those referrals and, staying in touch with the people who you've closed with, especially the ones you have a good connection and rapport with. I always, anytime someone sends me a client, I always send them something of value, like a gift card. And I don't send it for like 5 or 10. I send it for like 75 or $100.
Yeah.
Granted, my commissions are larger because our transactions are larger, but that is absolutely, in my opinion, you take care of those people, you train them, you reinforce that behavior. So from an easy marketing standpoint, that's one. And then beyond that, it's like, you have to start thinking about, if people Google you or people come across you on Facebook or whatever, what are they going to see?
Yeah.
What are like, if you go Google my name right now, you'll find that everything on there I've put there intentionally, and I own that front page for my name. Now, are people searching for me, my name specifically? Not necessarily, unless they hear me somewhere. But I want to make sure that I am absolutely controlling that 100%, and that part is free.
That's a really, really strong point. We've done a few hundred episodes now. I don't think anyone's really specifically talked about that. And even the referrals that obviously you're getting quite a number of, a lot of times those referrals might also Google you just to sort of see what you're about, even though you've came highly recommended from the person they know. So that is such a really strong point. And make sure that that your online presence is what you want to be seen. And if there are things out there that, would maybe negatively impact your business, that you're either okay with that or that you're willing to make those adjustments, because you're absolutely right. And then this goes into, what's my Zillow profile look like?
Yep.
Do I have a Google My Business page? Do I have some good reviews there? But also, what does my social media profile look like? My personal one, is it public? If it is, what am I posting? Is it okay? Am I posting things that maybe I wouldn't want people to see? These are all, you use the word intentional. This is really important stuff, because everyone's going to just assume everyone's going to Google you. And Hans has done a great job. His website is really, I'm not speaking to Hans now, of course, speaking to the audience, but his website is absolutely really impressive. I really encourage everyone to check it out. It'll be there in the show notes, but you'll see the intentionality he put into this website. And again, it's also, promoting his, he does a lot of videos. He does a podcast. He has a lot of good content on there. So if you go to his website, which, you Google his name, that's what's coming up first. I can just go to that homepage, and I know a lot about him. And you put a ton of time into that. And that is really, really important. And it's how we did a lot of research for you, to have you on the show. But boy, what a smart move.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. The way that I'm obviously fortunate to be on a team, and I get leads from the team. The team has overflow. My mentors are starting to trust me more, so they're giving me a few more of their kind of value clients because they're not too far from retiring. Like, that's a whole strategic play. And when I first joined that team, I was like, my number one marketing channel is to market to my team leaders. And I literally thought of it that way. Like, how do I bring them value? How do I prove to them that I can handle this? And that's like what I did for the first year and change, probably. And then it worked. And now I got a lot of trust. I get a lot of leads. I get a lot of opportunities with their past clients that they don't want to work with anymore. And, it's teeing me up in a different way. So marketing, you can go buy ads and be transactional in that way, which I'm not saying don't do. I'm just saying, like, think a little bit more intentionally, like, where's the lower hanging fruit for you? Because chances are it's probably right in front of you, and it might be free or pretty darn cheap.
Yeah, and you said something so important. I want to just circle back to it, where you said marketing to, in your case, you marketed to your team leaders, and I don't think anyone else has ever mentioned that as well, in specifically in that way. And so if I were an agent right now, which I technically am, but I don't practice, I would be begging every top producer in my office, and begging them meaning I'd be trying to provide them value, trying to build a relationship so that when they have open houses, I can go sit at those open houses. If leads aren't flowing your way from the group you're in or just the company you work for, go up to those top producers and say, I am dedicated to helping you sell these homes. Can you let me come in and do it? And I promise you got to be persistent. Obviously, you know about persistence, but that would be, that's marketing to your team leaders. That's one way to do that. And that's going to get you a ton of experience. Do as many of those as you can.
Definitely. And psychologically, the other thing I think about relative to the website and the videos I put out, like I see this still sticks in my mind. Like there's an agent that I've seen on social media who put something out at the beginning of October. So beginning of Q4, right? That was like the 90-day home ownership challenge. And I still remember this because and to me, it struck a chord negatively with me because it's sort of like, you should buy a house and here's why. Like, I don't want to find people that I have to convince to transact. Right. What I want to find is the people who are actively looking to transact, who have that motivation, and then tell them what they need to know to do it. Give them some value with my YouTube videos or my social media posts about things to look out for, or whatever the case is, and then draw them into my world. And that just generally with my newsletter that I put out, the YouTube videos, it's all about giving value away, explaining stuff to them that I would explain to my own clients. Hopefully in the way that I explain it to my clients, so that they can genuinely be helped in the 5 or 10 minutes they spend on my stuff. And when you bring that to your engagement and you stop trying to convince people to buy and just be a resource when people are ready to buy and just be consistently in front of them for that, you can't lose on that one.
Yeah, you're basically talking about attraction versus persuasion, right? Persuasion, a lot of times people want to study persuasion. They want to know how to overcome those objections. And of course, yes, you should have, answers to traditional objective type of questions and statements so that you can service your clients. But if you're trying to, it's a lot easier to attract people that are already interested in wanting to go down that path. In your case, you create lots of great content. People find that content online, and then think, hey, this is a guy who's providing a tremendous amount of value. I'm going to go with him. And Hans doesn't have to persuade people as much to convert them from a renter to a buyer, because he's already finding people that are interested in purchasing because of his content is centered around that, which I think makes a ton of sense. It's really smart.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I got to say, like, nothing I've done is original necessarily. And by that, I mean, it's not like I invented any of the strategies. My YouTube 100% came from Karen Carr. And if you don't know her, go Google her. She's got some cool YouTube stuff. And she gets like 75% of her business from YouTube leads. And she doesn't even, I think she has less than 10,000 YouTube subscribers, and most of her videos get, a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand views. Like she's not like a
viral sensation
per se, but she kills it. And then, podcasting, I do have a podcast. I've been doing it for over a year. It is not a real estate specific podcast. It's a, more of a mindset, human interest, storytelling podcast of people who happen to be good at business in most cases. And the reason I started that was to basically build my network. My mentor in that area is Travis Chappell, who has the Build Your Network podcast. I hired him as my podcast coach. He taught me everything he knew at the time about it. And basically, long and short of it, was the reason to start a podcast is not to build an audience. It's to have an excuse to get in front of the guest. And if you then say, like, if you called me up and said, hey, can I get 30 minutes of your time? I'm fairly generous. I might give it to you, but I might be busy. But if you called me and said, can I get you on my podcast? I'd be like, absolutely. Hell yeah. No problem. And that logic works on pretty much anybody you want to get in front of. So that's really why I started it and continue to do it.
Yeah, the podcast is called Another Way to Play. And again, we encourage everyone watching or listening right now to subscribe, check it out, listen to some stories, storytelling from top business execs from all over. And Hans and I were actually talking about this before we started. I'm just going to mention it because Hans seemed to be in agreement with me that one of the suggestions, Hans and I are podcasters, and we both do this to just provide value. And it's something that is a lot of fun, and probably I can't speak for Hans, but I imagine provides him with a lot of satisfaction of being able to share these stories and help other people, learn from these top business execs. And of course, we do a very similar thing on our show. And what we were talking about, podcasting, and for everyone listening who thinks that this is something that they can't do, maybe they don't have the voice for it, or they don't have the knack for this sort of conversation, you probably would be better at this than you think. But also, if you can commit to it, real estate, and of course Hans knows this better than I do, real estate is hyper local. You could create a hyper local podcast for your local community. If it was me, if I was a realtor, I don't have a lot of friends. Look, I've had a license for years and years. Not one of my friends has ever said, hey, can you help me buy or sell a home? Because they just don't think of me in that way, because I don't position myself that way. Mm-hmm. But if I were wanting to get more people interested in what me as a real estate agent, I would be reaching out to local businesses. If you think about it, local businesses are always getting hammered by all sorts of advertising companies, mm-hmm. newspapers, billboards, TV, radio. Hey, advertise. They want them to spend money to advertise their business. You can call up these local businesses, say, hey, I have a podcast where I feature local businesses in my 3-block area, or wherever you live, your town, your city, your county, whatever. And you can say, I just wanted to feature you and hear your story about why you started your business. I'm going to promote this to our listeners. They're going to love that. Just like Hans said, when he gets called and says, hey, can you be on my show? He jumps at it. I do the same thing. When people ask me to be on the show, I don't think I've ever turned anyone down, even if it's a really tiny podcast. I'm happy to do it because it might just get somebody else listening going, hey, I want to listen to what DJ's podcast is about, and Hans's podcast. And this is something anybody can do. You don't need a ton of equipment. I will say the hardest part about it for everyone listening is actually not the interview, because all you have to do is get a guest and say, tell me your story, and it'll probably go okay. The hardest part, and at least in my perspective, after doing this for 4 or 5 years now, is the post-production. And so mm-hmm. Hans and I were talking about that, and he's like, actually, I have a post-production company. So can you tell us a little bit about that? So anyone listening, by the way, I'm sorry, Hans, I'm stepping all over you, but I just wanted to say, you can start a podcast. You can interview mm-hmm. local businesses. Think about the value you're providing to them. And that's just one idea. There's a million podcast ideas, but that's a good one, because then they're going to want to promote it to their clientele, their social following. But then the hard part is all the editing and the production. So tell us about streamlinedpodcast.com.
Definitely. Well, I'll just piggyback on what you said, then we'll get into Streamlined, which is, if you're going to start a content-based strategy like a podcast or a YouTube channel, mentally, you have to commit for like a year to a minimum to do this.
When I brought this idea to my boss, and he goes, here's the thing, you have to commit for a year or don't do it at all. And I was like, and I had to think about it. It took me like 2 more years before I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I just said, I'm going to do it for a year. And we had like no listeners for like half a year. And so yes, you're absolutely right.
So the point is, it just the algorithms, it's crowded, like whether it's YouTube, Facebook, whatever, I don't care. Do it for a year. Because it also, like, if you say someone looks up your show and you've got 7 episodes and they were all from like 8 months ago, that looks really sad.
Yeah, it does.
At least if you close down your show, but you have 150 episodes, it's like, okay, you probably moved on to like a new project or something. Like, that's respectable, if nothing else. Right. So same thing with YouTube videos and all that sort of stuff. But basically at the beginning of COVID, when everything was up in the air, we didn't know if the sky was going to fall or not. I was listening to Gary Keller's podcast a lot, and he was talking about basically demanding more value out of the dollars that you're spending in your business, and challenging us to see where we could cut 10% a month. And for me, I was already running pretty lean personally and in my business. And I thought, okay, where is the next biggest expenditure? And it was my podcast editing. And I've never edited my own podcast. I've always paid someone. I've had enough money to commit and invest into it. I've always paid someone for logos and all the other things that I've created. And I realized, like, I don't think I'm getting the highest value I possibly can out of this $500 or whatever it was every month. And I was like, so there, at the very minimum, I can probably get the same thing done for less. And so I talked to a buddy who was in a mastermind that I was part of, who had a VA company, and he had done at the time 600 episodes of his show. He was a daily show, so it was racking them up. And I was like, who are you using? And he introduced me to his guy. And then that guy started talking. And then meanwhile, another one of our buddies in the same podcast or in the same mastermind was thinking about starting a company. And so we all kind of got together with a fourth guy and said, we're all having this issue of paying too much, not being delivered. We're not monetizing these shows. So these are all loss leaders for our brands personally or whatever. And so we're like, we can do this better. So we created this thing called Streamlined Podcast, which is essentially a service that keeps podcasters podcasting. And we know that the majority of shows out there won't monetize big enough to warrant, making it a full-time job. And so how can we provide the highest value for the lowest cost? And effectively, we have taken what any person, like the industry average for editing, and cut it almost in half, and increased the value of the show notes, the post-production, the ID3 and metadata tagging, and social media graphics, all rolled into that one low cost. And the goal is to make it as easy as possible and economical as possible for someone to start a show and keep the show going.
Yeah, I love that. It's so funny. I up until about a year and a half ago, I was doing all of that myself. I'm a guy who builds websites, and I'm a marketing guy, so I love getting my hands dirty. But it's really not the best use of my time. So I know how to do it, but it takes so much time. And so I did it for the first. We've done 220 episodes. I probably did it for the first 120, and I was killing myself after like 3 years of doing it. I was like, what am I doing? This is not where my time is best spent. But I was just didn't want to spend the money. I knew I could do it for free, and I would do a good job, but I was killing myself doing it. And finally, now I have somebody to do it. But I wish I would have had streamlinedpodcast.com, because back when I started, it was so expensive, and I couldn't find a reasonable solution for that. So I encourage everyone who's listening, if you're thinking about starting a show, don't do the post-production yourself. It's one of the smartest things I ever did was to pass that over. And streamlinedpodcast.com is the place to go, because they're incredibly reasonably priced, and it's something that's affordable, and you can do it, and you can just focus on the show, and don't worry about all the technical aspects of it, because it is a bear to do.
And same thing with gear. Like we've got a bunch of blog posts up on our website that you can go check out if you just want to get some free resources of all the gear that I bought. I mean, the entire setup that I have that you're listening to this on costs well under $100. And I've recorded every single one of my podcasts on this microphone. I've got a ring light. I've got literally my iPhone here that you're looking at, which the phones these days are super good. So why buy another one? And, you kind of, and GarageBand or whatever operating system, it's so easy to start this kind of stuff once you kind of get a little bit of a nudge. And hopefully some of those blog posts, if you go to the resources section of that website, you can read through those and click on links, and it'll take you all kinds of places.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a really great place to sort of wrap up. We've talked about so much. Oh my gosh. I can't even recap all the topics, but really, I think the main point that I think our audience is going to take away from this is just consistency, discipline, push through. The good news is, and Hans mentioned Gary Keller in his podcast. Of course, Hans works at Keller Williams, which of course is Gary founded company. Gary's all about having coaches and you putting your head down and doing the work. And really this business is so much really not dissimilar from the training that Hans, I'm sure, did to become an Olympic athlete. It's discipline, it's hard work. And the good news is there's so many people that have done it before us. Hans has resources on streamlinedpodcast.com. If you want to start a podcast, go there, and he's got all sorts of, you don't have to spend a fortune on gear. He can take care of the post-production. Gary Keller's got he's got books and podcasts and resources as well to learn how to grow a business. You don't even have to be with Keller Williams. You can learn Gary Keller's approach. I guess the point is get a coach, get coachable, and stay disciplined. Hans, gosh, you just basically shared that same message over and over today. And I really hope that resonated with our audience. I want to remind everyone to please listen to Hans's podcast, which is Another Way to Play. So Google that, look it up on your podcast directory. You can also find it right on Hans's website, which is hansstruzyna.com. That's HANSSTRUZYNA.com. Hans, on behalf of our audience, we want to thank you for your time today. You're an incredible guest. We're super excited to have an Olympic athlete turned top real estate agent. And can I share your production for this year, or is that something you want to keep private?
Bring it, man. Bring it.
Hans
it hasn't all closed yet, so.
Well, Hans is on pace to close 30 million. This is his personal production this year, and there's about a month and a half left, and he's going to get there. 30 million, and you were in your 5th year. That is beyond incredible, right? So for everyone listening,
appreciate it.
Go to listen to his podcast. I'm going to listen to his podcast because I want to increase the production that I do for my company, and I want to get to the level that you're at. So for everyone listening, though, we also, on behalf of Hans and myself, we want to thank you for continuing to listen, to support our show, supporting our guests. And we want to remind everyone if you want to help us grow our show, there's 2 ways to do that. Number 1, tell a friend. Think of one other real estate professional that could benefit from having heard from Hans, Olympic athlete turned top producer. And this episode, shoot them a link to it. You can find us on our website, which is keepingitrealpod.com. We have every episode we've ever done. We have them broken down into the different show categories. So if you just want to listen to all the top 1% producers like this one with Hans, we have a place to do that. And you don't even need a podcast app for it. Just go to our website. And the other way is to follow us on Facebook. You can find us at facebook.com/keepingitrealpod. We post all of our interviews that we do while we're recording them there. We also find articles every single day that online that are written specifically designed to help agents grow their business, and we post it. That's all we post. There's no fat. It's all meat. So facebook.com/keepingitrealpod. Hans, thank you so much. I am so excited that you were on the show, and we excited to watch your continued trajectory upwards too.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I'll just leave the audience with this. When you start to put consistent action to work over time, key phrase over time, amazing things will happen. So thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it. And to all of you listening, I hope to connect with you soon.
All right. Thanks. We'll see everyone next time.